Why do you think she's using her HRH title, albeit in a private letter, and clinging on to her Sussex name rather than Markle?
Well, it's clearly social capital. I mean, I think that I'm sure her PA, uses it to ensure that she gets that top table at a restaurant. I mean, it will have a huge weight in America to have that kudos of still having that sort of royal aura around her. And it is hypocritical in my I'm sure, I don't know, I'm just, surmising, but I'm sure she uses it a lot because it is something of value, particularly in the social circle she moves in. And Katie and I were talking beforehand about this sort of constant question about whether or not the sort of image, the brand, if you want, of sort of Harry and Meghan is still perceived in a totally different way than it is in the Commonwealth, and it probably isn't now. I mean, they've overstayed their welcome. But, on one level, you can't have sort of, tweaked all those emotional sort of triggers and then go back privately to continue doing it. It's not a great look in my estimation.
I think it just poses or just off the back of what Mark's saying, just a bit of a hypocrisy element, a big issue over, well, you've attacked this institution many, many times, most recently in a podcast, which we've just heard this week, and yet you want to retain all of the perks and privileges of being in that institution, which is, of course, the titles, because I suppose if they are just Harry and Meghan Sussex, because that is her name. She's right to say she's not a Markle anymore. When you marry, most people take their husband's name, and that's what she's done. But she doesn't need to be using the HRH title. She doesn't really need to be using the Duchess of Sussex. But of course, that sets her aside from, everyone else, including top-list, A-list Hollywood celebrities. I just think that Andrew is, as you say, so toxic. I don't think there is any hope of a rehabilitation for him.
He is toxic. There's no work about it. And that, that interview was
a disaster.
The full stop. I mean, I think I described at the time it was like the equivalent of driving a clown car with a lit cigarette through a firework factory. It was just jaw-droppingly sort of deaf in terms of, and blind in some ways to things around you.
And yet we're 6 years on and it still hasn't recovered for Andrew. No. It's still, more
no, because
worse
he keeps trying to edge his way back in.
He won't let go.
That's
in the same way that Harry and Meghan won't let go of those HRH titles, he just is clinging on. He needs to let go.
And as soon as you edge back in, it's a story.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Uncovered, where we peel back the layers of royal headlines and give you the real story behind the glitz and drama. Today, we're diving into a hot topic that's sparking debate everywhere, from Twitter threads to dinner tables. Are Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and Prince Andrew truly addicted to their royal titles? Or is there something more complicated at play beneath the surface? Let's get right into it. Meghan and Harry made global headlines when they stepped back from royal duties, promising a new chapter away from the palace spotlight. But if you've seen the latest viral video making the rounds, there's a twist that's hard to ignore. Despite their public farewell to the firm, Meghan's still quietly using her HRH title. The video zooms in on a gift basket she signed as HRH the Duchess of Sussex, a subtle but telling detail that's got everyone talking. Why does that matter? Well, in Hollywood, titles aren't just fancy words, they're currency. They open doors to exclusive events, they make people pay attention, and, let's be honest, they add a certain sparkle to your brand that money can't buy. For Meghan, who's building a new life in the world of celebrity, that royal connection is a powerful asset. But here's where things get complicated. Meghan and Harry have built their new public image on calling out royal life as outdated, even toxic. They've spoken openly about the pressures, the lack of support, and the need for change. Yet at the same time, they're still benefiting from the very titles and privileges they criticize.
I joined the Prince and Princess of Wales on their wedding anniversary, their 14th wedding anniversary. It wasn't weird. I wasn't in a room next to them with a cup by the wall or anything like that. But
well, they were in a very remote lodge, very deliberately.
They were in a very remote lodge.
As far away from the media as they could get.
It was really, really nice. And I just want to have spend a little bit of time discussing some happiness. Because is it just nice to see two people clearly in love, clearly happy, having a whale of a time in a beautiful setting of the Isle of Mull?
Yeah, it's lovely. And I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a time when they've done something public on their wedding anniversary in the past. I mean, they usually choose to celebrate it, understandably, privately. And then when they realised that, this trip fell over their wedding anniversary, apparently they said to their aides, we're happy to go ahead with it. And obviously, getting away together, going to Scotland, which is very significant to them because, of course, it's where they met at St Andrews. It's a place they love. I mean, I'm told that they've been up to Scotland quite a few times while Kate's been, in her period of remission. It's somewhere that's very special to both of them. And they look, well, you were with them, but everything we saw in terms of the footage and the images, they looked so happy together. And it was an important trip for Catherine. It was her first away trip since her cancer diagnosis. Hopefully we're going to see, more of her travelling around the country and possibly even further afield. She looked wonderful, she looked healthy, she looked happy. They looked very, very in love. And I think, when you look at them together, it's a really important image that for the royal family at a time when it's been through a huge amount of flux and turbulence, and we've got a king who's living with cancer. These two are they're the bright hope for the House of Windsor. They're the promise of the future.
For me, it was the happiness. It was the kind of joy, the kind of excitement that they bring to the royal family and bring to engagements that some of the other royals... I mean, you look at some of the footage of Harry and Meghan, for instance, when they're abroad in Colombia or when they're in Canada or just recently in New York, seem a bit glum, seem a bit down. This couple just bring it every time, bring their A game. We're talking about the way they looked. Princess of Wales I think she had a lighter... a hair highlight, do I call it?
Yeah, she looked like she'd had a few highlights put in her hair, and I liked the fact that they were twinning in tweed and very deliberately sort of dressed down, hiking boots on, out in the forest, meeting communities and children benefiting from those communities. It just felt very very authentic and doing the sorts of things that they love to do.
Is that hypocrisy? The video certainly thinks so, and honestly, it's hard not to see the contradiction. It's like wanting to have your cake and eat it too, criticizing the system while still cashing in on its perks. Now let's talk about Prince Andrew. A whole different story, but with some striking similarities. After his disastrous BBC interview and the serious allegations that followed, he was stripped of his military honors and royal duties. The palace made it clear he was out. But as the video points out, Andrew hasn't really let go. He's still showing up at family events, still clinging to his identity as a prince, even as the public and the press have largely turned their backs. It's as if he's hoping that by staying close, he can somehow reclaim what he's lost. Watching Andrew is like watching someone refuse to move on, even when the writing's on the wall and the world has moved forward. There's a sense of denial, a refusal to accept that the old rules no longer apply. What really stands out in all of this is the contrast with Prince William and Princess Kate. The video highlights how they're redefining what it means to be royal, showing up at small local events, being present in the moment, hugging fans, and connecting with people in a way that feels genuine and unscripted. There's a rawness, a sincerity there that people are craving, especially now, as King Charles faces serious health challenges. The public wants to see their royals as real people, not just distant figures on a balcony. And here's the real heart of this debate: authenticity. In a world full of spin and PR, people are desperate for something real, something honest. The royals who show vulnerability and openness are the ones winning hearts. The monarchy is evolving, whether the old guard likes it or not. The Cambridges are getting praise for being approachable, relatable, and willing to break with tradition when it matters most. Meanwhile, Meghan, Harry, and Andrew can sometimes come off as a bit scripted, a bit too polished.
And that's exactly what I would say. We talked about the lack of authenticity, the artifice that surrounds Meghan and Harry. Here we have what I feel about it. They feel like they're in control. They feel that there is a balance between what they have to do and how they want to sort of ensure that their life, particularly for their family, is as real and as possible. So it felt honest if you're talking. It felt honest if you're talking about it, and I think that's what sort of comes out from this, and this is where people really connect with something now, particularly under the glare of modern media, that we can actually immediately feel there is something real about something. Where you look at this, you think, well, what's a game? What's the game the others are playing? You
immediately talk about the authenticity, and I remember just before the weekend, William was in Elephant and Castle in South London, and he went to a community centre. Have you seen the footage where William's walking down a pathway, and it's a long walk for the photographers to get the picture of William attending this event, long way down a path, and the security guards, there's a couple of barriers, and an incredible woman comes across. And then if you've seen the footage, she comes across like shouting, calling out to William, gives him a big hug, said, "Oh, it's the prince, it's the prince." And it's those little moments where you go, yeah, this isn't staged, this isn't PR, this is actually them kind of being their authentic selves.
Yeah. And very relatable as well. And, you know, and I think you see that in The King as well. I wonder if it sort of coincides with, and I think it does, with the death of the late Queen. And with that, I think, you know, we're always going to have this moment of transition with the monarchy, but I think in so many ways, it feels more modern. It feels more relatable. And, you know, you're right. You look at William and Kate and they look really happy. I mean, you and I have done enough of these royal tours. We know they're hard work. I'm sure you're knackered because the schedule is full on, right? But I've been away with you to the other side of the world with them, and they make these tours almost look like a second honeymoon. No, they look happy to be away. They're happy to be engaging with members of the public. And this is the first we've seen of them as a couple in, over a year now. And I think there's something very reassuring about that. They are a great partnership. They're a brilliant team. They're clearly very happy, and you know what? They're doing really good work. They've condensed and focused their work, their charitable initiatives, and you sort of feel like this is a couple on a mission. They're on a mission to do some really good, important work, and they're doing it.
The public isn't blind to it. They can sense when something's being put on for the cameras. People want to see the real deal, not a manufactured image. They want to know that the people representing them are genuine, not just playing a part for the press. So let's bring it back to you. Should Meghan and Harry have to give up their titles for good? Is it fair for them to keep the perks while criticizing the system? Or is it possible to use those titles for good, even from the outside? And what about Prince Andrew? Is he ever really going to fade from royal life? Or is that just wishful thinking? Can someone so tied to the institution ever truly step away? I want to hear your take, so drop a comment below. Do you think the royals should be held to a higher standard? Or is it time to let them live their own lives, titles and all? If you're as tired of the spin as I am, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Uncovered family for more no-nonsense royal stories. We're here to cut through the noise and bring you the truth every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for more royal reality. No filter, no fluff, just the facts you need to know.